Anthony Armand Ferguson Padilla. Tony was born in California, which is the largest Hispanic population in all of the United States of America. He's of Mexican heritage. El Cucuy, the Ninja Turtle, the boogeyman, Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson didn't know who his biological father was as a child. He had a stepfather of Scottish American descent, and that's why he adopted the name Ferguson as his last name. Ferguson, of course, isn't a typical Mexican name, and this was brought to light by a lot of fans and even fighters themselves.
You from Mexico? You're not real Mexican. Hey, you fake Mexican. What are you talking about? First you say you're American, now you talk about you're Mexican? Fake. Where are you from? Where are you from? You Ferguson. You Ferguson. No, bro. You're not Mendes or something like this.
It was quite hard to find a lot about Tony Ferguson's childhood. Not everyone has the luxury of growing up with both of their biological parents, but the investment and the environment that the guardians of a child creates is what will shape the young man or woman into who they will become in the future.
My dad wasn't there in the picture, and I ended up moving to Michigan. Coming from seeing a bunch of brown people to being a hillbilly town, I got picked on a lot. And unfortunately, I was known as the little Mexican with big ears. It was kind of like you had to find your way in order to overcome that. Mine was sports.
Whether it's Scottish, American, Mexican, his fighting style always showed so much heart, and heart is typically manufactured through tough times. In Tony's words, "I'm American made with Mexican parts." The Mexican style of fighting label is usually given with such high praise because you receive an accolade of someone who comes forward, avoids the hit and don't get hit style. You're someone who's willing to take a few shots to give a few shots, put the pressure on, and seriously hurt your opponent. You're gonna come forward and you're gonna give them hell. For anyone criticizing Tony claiming to be Mexican, he definitely earned those accolades with that fighting style. Tony Ferguson was a 3-sport athlete when he was in high school. He took to baseball, football, and wrestling. 3 massively different sports. Being a pitcher in baseball, you're trying to outthink your opponent, whip the ball incredibly fast, and then in American football, you're the last line of defense as you play the defensive back position. You're not gonna let anyone run through you. You've got a mentality where I'm gonna do whatever I want, you're not getting through me here. And then with his fighting style, his combat sports base was wrestling, an incredibly intense chess match that goes at 100 miles an hour, where you're trying to find any small gap that you can exploit in your opponent and then get the pin and win the decision. Just by competing in 3 sports, Tony Ferguson already broke the average mold of a human being. It was said that Tony Ferguson suffered a lot with anxiety issues during his early teen years, hence why his stepfather promoted sports in his life. The fact that he was succeeding so much in all 3 sports shows you that his mental capacity for athletics was incredibly high. High school athletes would typically start to specialize in their chosen sport to groom into that level, but Tony chose to do it his own way and march to the beat of his own drum. He also shows in this interview that he was never scared of thinking big.
I'm an athlete, born and bred. I played football, baseball, and wrestling. And before I even took this fight, I was actually getting my right arm ready, like a Ricky Vaughn fastball, I say that. But I really want to go play pro ball, like MLB, and I think I got the opportunity to be able to do that.
And that's an important quality to have. The ability to think big, to dream big, and to continue to pursue further is such an amazing quality to have, because you will continuously press forward. You will always have motivation to continue to reach that goal that you set out, even if you may have made a mockery of just for stating those dreams that you had. The ability to dream bigger, think bigger, and believe in your own dreams even when no one else does builds your mental toughness. That, coupled with your ability to have heart when times get tough, makes for a great fighter. Tony Ferguson found a lot of success during his high school athletic career. He was the starting defensive back for the 2000 state football champions and was a 3-time all-state selection in wrestling, winning the 152-pound division in 2002. After high school, Tony Ferguson transferred to Grand Valley State University, where he also did a stint at Muskegon Community College. Even though Tony Ferguson did not continue his academic studies at the community college, he had a very successful collegiate wrestling career. He won the 2006 NCAA National Wrestling Championship in the 165-pound division, so his wrestling accolades were incredibly impressive after his stint in high school, thereby giving him a perfect base to transition into mixed martial arts. Even though the game has changed so much in the last 30 years since the inception of the UFC, a lot of people thought that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was the best base to have, but coming from the generation where Tony was training in one art form only, wrestling does allow you to dictate where the fight will go, whether you prefer to keep a standing clinch against the fence or take your opponent down. These aspects of the fight do score points and do tend to be favored in the judge's eyes, so he has a perfect combat sports base. Mixed with his mentality, this should make for a great fighter. After his stint at the community college where he did not finish his studies, Tony Ferguson actually felt homesick at this point and decided to move back home with his family. He decided to take on multiple jobs working in marketing and sales, and at night he would be a bartender. One night while working a bartending shift, a punter in the bar actually noticed his cauliflower ears from his days of wrestling and got to chatting with him about his combat experience, what's his athletic background, and the patron of the bar was saying that he had a gym where he had young mixed martial artists, you know, he had young prospects, and he wanted Tony Ferguson to come in and help with wrestling. It was shortly after this that Tony Ferguson, after wrestling with these younger prospects, he probably found so much success. Maybe he was ragdolling these guys or really giving them some good work, and he probably got confidence himself and said, hey, maybe this is something I can do. This was probably even more confirmation of his mental toughness, just because he had already competed in 3 sports, he loved his athletics, and now he's working in marketing and sales and a bartender. It's not really congruent with his high school teen years, so why wouldn't you continue something that you were already phenomenal at, something that you've got a proven track record in? You're giving these younger guys good work, but why don't you become the star instead? And that's when he transitioned into a nice mixed martial arts career. I'm actually from Michigan. I took Spanish when I was little. When I moved to California and I started fighting, everyone's a little bit Spanish speaking, especially at the gym that I trained out of. Next door there was actually a little church there, and this kid, he would come over, stick his head inside the gym, and I was training. I guess I had a scary face or something. I was lifting weights, and after that he kind of got scared. The trainer made fun of it. They called me El Cucuy, which stands for the boogeyman. Over the course of Tony Ferguson's regional circuit, his first fight was actually in 2008. At this point, he was 24 years old, so you could say he had a bit of a late start in his MMA career. He accumulated a record of 10-2 on the regional circuit. He had a lot of finishes at this point, and that got him a role on The Ultimate Fighter.
Tony Ferguson, this kid, I think, is the guy that could possibly win the show. And Tony has been doing a lot of training on his own.
I want to win the whole thing. I want to make my mom and dad proud back in Michigan. I want to make all my friends back in California. You know, I got a lot of places that I represent, but, you know, I want to do it for myself more than anything. You know, I hope that everybody else, you know, especially in the world, can look at me and be like, you know, this guy, he wanted it a lot more than that guy. My dad and my mom sent me something on my birthday, my little dream box. You know, inside this little box has my dream, you know? And I'll tell you what, every single day I wake up and I kiss it and I hold on to it tight. This is a dream come true. You don't get this many chances, you know? My mom called me Mr. Destiny. This is my destiny. Every time I fight, I always show up with shirt and tie, and it's something different that I've always done. I'm a class act. I'm not just like anybody else, and I will leave it all out there.
During The Ultimate Fighter, Tony Ferguson came across as the ultimate blue-collar hard worker. He had an exciting fighting style, and even as Brock Lesnar had said, he saw potential in him right away. The Ultimate Fighter alumni is very strong. It's bred some very successful champions, future champions, and even title contenders. By Tony having 3 great finishes, he showed that he really meant business and was deserving to be put in the same class as those fighters in the past. You could tell that Tony's approach was a bit different. He wasn't scared to display his personality, and he even made his mentality very clear. During the Chris Cope altercation, Tony Ferguson comes across as someone that you don't really want to mess with or betray, but he also comes across as someone who's a respectful guy. He gets along with everyone, he minds his business, he lets you mind yours.
Tap out. You know, I really don't know how to talk very well. And Cope comes upstairs and he comes at me.
A, you right in the stand all the time. B, the writing matches up perfectly. You
Think twice about what you're about to say next, bro. Just shut up, dude, while you're still ahead. Take your bun, go back downstairs, do whatever the you have to do. Just don't talk to me, okay? I don't talk. I never have, and I never will. I know better than that. I'm an honest guy. You call me downtown Tony? No, shut up, bro. Don't call me a liar.
I'm not calling you a liar. I never said that.
Look, you sleep next to me.
Okay. All right.
Look, that's hard enough, bro.
Understood.
You go downstairs, you talk to the team and everything else like that.
I'm not.
Listen, bro.
No, I think you guys think.
Alcohol tends to bring out the worst in a lot of people, especially when you overexert. When you have insecurities, deep, twisted thoughts that you've pushed down, alcohol will expose those things, bring them to light, and make you look a fool in front of everyone, especially people you don't know that well.
It was all good fun. Tony's a little intoxicated. And then, next thing we know, Tony's got Charlie over the couch, puts his arm through the coffee table. Wait, stop. You like beer? All right, don't be mean. Don't be mean. Tony? Are you getting serious? You good? Are you good? It's looking at you. Are you really getting serious? He knows. Look at me. Get the off of me. Shake my hand and we're good. You don't want to be good, then let's go. I tell you what. You know what? Where's your kid at? Clean it for you. Where's your kid at? Where's your kid at? Don't say it. Hey, where's your kid at? It's a situation back home that, you know, I've been fighting for over a year now. Only, you know, he knew that. Hit me and say your kid. Hit me and say your kid. You're the only motherfucker that ever said some that you shouldn't say. What I say? You said, where's your Oh, so you kidding me? Where's your son? Like, serious? You better watch what say. Oh, you watch your mouth. Tony, watch your mouth. Oh, end your life, you little bitch.
This scene made everyone shift away from Tony. Initially, he came across as the guy who was a hard worker, sort of the dark horse of the show, and a very exciting and gritty fighter. But then he came across as kind of an arsehole, to be honest. But he was a dangerous arsehole. Imagine telling someone a very deep personal pain that you have, something that you're fighting deep inside, only for them to use it against you once they're drunk, even for no benefit at all. Tony Ferguson's mind clearly had a large capacity for excellence, but it's clear to see some darkness within there, some dark traits Tony Ferguson himself doesn't even want to venture down and address.
Justin's on top, but Tony's laying some good elbows, which forced Justin back out and onto his feet. Replay maybe.
As soon as I saw him come up, I just turned my hips to the side. I knew he wasn't going to see it. Bam, heel kick right to the face.
Tony's nasty. He's had 2 quick finishes here in this competition, and Brock Lesnar feels he's the best guy here. Congratulations.
Tony's got a lot of inner demons, and if you're gonna beat him, you're gonna have to take his heart.
All right, this is it. Tony versus Ramsey.
Once the final was set between Tony Ferguson and Ramsey Nijem, Ramsey was being pushed very far. He was seen on a lot of talk shows, the Ultimate Fighter preview shows, breaking down things with Karen Bryan, and it seemed as though the UFC was trying to groom him as the winner. Maybe because the altercation that Tony had, the drunken scene, didn't paint him in the best light, and that's probably not someone that they wanted to push. Ramsey, however, was always having fun, dancing around, being entertaining, and also a good fighter, so that's more to what the UFC caters to.
Right after we got done with the last fight at the house, I went and got a ring, brought it to the airport, met my girl, ex-Tina, was trying to get down on her knee, and she said yes before she looked at the ring, but I was like, no. She was choking me with a hug. I was like, no, you gotta look at the ring.
Tony Ferguson scored an absolutely devastating knockout over Ramsey Nijem, and in the post-fight interview, Joe Rogan's first question was to ask him, the Ultimate Fighter showed some of your best qualities and some of your worst. This was something they clearly talked about behind the scenes. Tony Ferguson did a good job in his interview with Joe Rogan. He left a great lasting impression and said that he wanted to be a role model for everyone else out there.
He clipped him with that one. It's the left hook that really got him. And then he finished it up. It brings out the best and the worst of fighters. What was it like in there for you?
You know what? I learned a lot about myself in there. I kept a lot of stuff bottled up, and I brought a lot of inner demons with me inside there. But every single fight, what I did was I tried to fight them out. You don't leave it all out there. I got a lot of guardian angels upstairs that are looking after me, you know, and they make sure that I try to do the right thing. You know, from here on out, it's like I want to do the right thing, make a good example, set something up for these kids so that way they can look for me as a, you know, role model.
After defeating Ramsey Nijem by knockout, Tony Ferguson showed a lot of promise. He showed potential in his skill set and showed diversity in his ability for combat. However, because it was so hard to root for him through his tough antics, we felt indifferent about him. Even though he won the Ultimate Fighter, showed promise, and even joined a lineage of elite fighters in the past, we didn't seem to care that much just because his personal antics on the show made us detract from actually being invested in him emotionally. We didn't really care if he did well in the future until he made us care. This is where Tony Ferguson was born. Even though the mixed martial arts community is relatively small compared to other leagues, the Ultimate Fighter program does allow you to springboard into some sort of stardom relative to the size of the sport as it is. Tony Ferguson was not allowed this luxury just due to the fact that his personality on the show didn't come across that great. The fans weren't that excited to see him win and to see what he would go on to do. Of course, there were people who were interested, but they were in the minority. Being a fight fan, you know that fighters have to fight for us to commit. And I don't mean fight in the literal sense, I mean they have to do something that makes us commit to want to watch them, to go out of our way to watch them, to rearrange our own schedule, to be fully invested with them. And when you're invested in a fighter, when they win, it feels like you win, and when they lose, it feels like you lose. It can be the most heartbreaking thing in the world, even as a fan. But in order to become invested in a fighter, I've linked it to 3 things. One is that they are your countrymen, so you have that commonality with them and almost feel as though they are representing you. It gives you almost an instant doorway into being a fan of them and following their journey. Second is their fighting style. Perhaps they're the best in the world, perhaps they're the most technical person in the world, perhaps they fight safe, but you enjoy the way they do things. There's certain fighters today who, for example, know exactly how to employ their game plan, and it may not be the most exciting slugfest, but people are still massively drawn to it because they can appreciate those arts. But then again, when I say fighting style, it could also mean you're just there to be in a bloodbath, to be in a war, and you're willing to put your heart on the line every single time and go out on your shield. Fans will respect this, and that's the reason they'll follow you. Third reason for liking a fighter, I believe it comes through their personality or their story. Perhaps you heard something about their story that really made you drawn to them, or perhaps you just like the way they speak in interviews, the way they speak about certain things. Maybe they're a great trash talker, maybe they're just really respectful and you like that, they're nice, or perhaps they've had some tragedy in their life that you can relate to. I've always found it was these three things that draw you into a fighter. Tony has chosen the hardest of these three routes. The American public themselves don't seem to connect with their own fighters sometimes. Sometimes the American public aligns with their fighters, but it doesn't happen that often. That's why we have so many great boxers in America who don't have big names. The British public, the Irish public, or any other country that has a countryman following them, maybe it's Holland or somewhere in Africa like Cameroon, Nigeria, Australia, New Zealand, all these places, they do really get behind their people. But in American sports, yes, they get behind in other leagues like NFL, but when it comes to fighting, it's just not the same purpose. Perhaps the state will get behind them, but still not as much. So unfortunately, Tony cannot use the countryman aspect. Also, because of his last name being Ferguson, it appears as though the Mexican support is not actually there as it was for someone like a Cain Velasquez or even a Yair Rodriguez at this point. In terms of his personality or his story doesn't come across as much, even though it is very intriguing in The Ultimate Fighter, but only his personality, his darkest traits had come across on live TV. Now, the UFC selected those pieces. I'm sure there were probably so much footage that they cut out, but they selected those pieces because it's the most polarizing thing that he probably did on that show. And of course, there were probably some people who still thought that was great, but it's probably in the very low numbers. And most of us were turned off by this. So Tony Ferguson chose to pursue this through his fighting style to get you invested. Maybe he didn't consciously make the decision, but we as fans would learn to later appreciate Tony for his skills purely based on his in-ring ability. All the while doing this, putting his entire body on the line, going in there to mercilessly beat his opponent down in a warrior spirit, he was forever linked to a pound-for-pound Dagestani king throughout his UFC tenure. Tony's UFC career became a mission with multiple side quests. His primary focus was to climb the ranks, live up to the boogeyman moniker, and secure the title. His side quest, whether intentional or not, was to prove he was willing to show more mental grit than the opponent, naturally gaining fan attention in the process. Another side quest was to show his unfiltered, untypical personality through it all and become the most meme-worthy fighter of all time, while also unintentionally displaying vulnerability exactly as he did on Tough. These events would later unravel throughout his UFC tenure, but there was one lingering dark horse objective through it all, an objective that would soon shape his entire career and become the most prominent storyline in Tony's UFC journey, derailing the undefeated Khabib Nurmagomedov. Let's dive into all of these timelines, but if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to subscribe. After winning The Ultimate Fighter in 2011, Christina said that Tony, Christina being Tony's fiance at the time, had a mental break. The Tough champion flew home to visit his parents in Michigan and was apparently removed from the flight because of an alleged outburst. Christina wrote that Tony went to hospital in Michigan and he was prescribed risperidone, a medication which can be used to treat schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Tony and Christina were happily married in 2012, and she said that things did get better until 2017. There was a time when Tony vowed to protect her and their son, but Christina said that he has begun to think she was evil and would not let her shower or be in the bathroom alone. Tony's behavior is getting worse and more frightening. I'm afraid that during one of his episodes he will kill me, our son, and or himself. This story, even though it was well hidden and kept under wraps until recently, shows us that even though in one interview Tony Ferguson is talking about his passion to become a role model for people out there, in the same span of 48 hours and flying home, he was unable to control his emotions and act professionally, which then resulted in him being thrown off the plane. This means that Tony Ferguson still had those demons inside of him, something about Tony that could not be contained. This is the genesis of multiple timelines that will come to fruition and congregate at the end of this video. But beginning from where we are after The Ultimate Fighter, Tony Ferguson showed that he had a great wrestling pedigree with KO power. He was slick on his back. He utilized his wrestling ability, knock out shots, and dominate fights.
Stand-up exchange. He won in this building 6 months ago to become season 13's Ultimate Fighter at 170. Inside.
Solid left uppercut by El Cucuy.
Again, El Cucuy.
There's the right hand that hurt him. That one hurt him.
Now he's starting to turn it on.
Body.
Big flurry by Tony Ferguson.
He's trying to battle out of it. He's trying to battle out of it.
Just what a great lightweight battle.
And there's the third shot of Yves Edwards' career. Oh, look at this. El Cucuy rolls over.
10 seconds.
Rolling omoplata. Beautiful job by El Cucuy here. Cannot get his left leg underneath his right. He's got it now. Back up to his feet.
Final seconds of the round.
This happened up until the Danny Castillo fight.
He just clipped Danny Castillo with that right.
Look out for that darts. He catches it standing. This is it. He might just be trying to tire Danny out the same way he has a very, very restricted blood flow to his brain. He's out now. He's out.
Nicely done, Danny. Potential takedown for Castillo.
Look at that beautiful roll. Danny on top. Danny on top, inside control.
With lots of time to work.
Because the off... Oh, beautiful job. Utilizing the cage.
And he's got the mount for a moment.
For a moment, but look at this. Danny's on top
what
again.
What a scramble. Yeah, and in the guard, but an on-top position.
Back to his feet.
Can he get a takedown? Yep, that's his second.
He got it.
Second takedown of the fight for Castillo.
And Tony back to his feet again. Danny's got him up and down once more, trying to step over. He can't just lay here. Yeah, he's got to do something.
I thought I had him finished in the first round with my darts, but obviously I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board, and I had a little coach in the back actually give me some pointers, so I'm going to go back and go back to the drawing board. I wanted to wrestle him, but I didn't practice that. So, you know what? I'm going to go back to the drawing board, and next time I'm going to make it full well-rounded MMA.
Tony then made a transition into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under the tutelage of Eddie Bravo. His BJJ became a higher priority in his fight, especially in the Abel Trujillo fight. Tony started to display much more attacking presence on the ground, where he was actively looking for gaps to exploit and snap up submissions in a quick and rapid way. Tony Ferguson's performance against Josh Thompson showed his ability to outlast opponents, make them wilt, and mentally break his opponent. Listen to this from Josh Thompson.
Back in, I watched it like 2 times. It's hard to watch. Is that when you are taking damage that you have never taken before. But when I fought Tony and I was in the shower and I got done, I was a fucking bloody mess, probably about 20 something stitches on my face, you know, from my head to my face. The reality had set in, like, this ain't for you anymore, brother.
And with Josh Thompson, he pissed me off. He had 15 minutes with me because for a reason he at the weigh-ins he got in my face. So in between rounds, I sent him back to his corner to think about exactly what he did wrong. And in the third round, I made sure that he was bloody and wanted to quit. He didn't want any other part of me in there.
Prolong that fight on purpose.
Dog, you know it. I'm the boogeyman, I'm El Cucuy. And what you do is when you piss off the boogeyman, you're going to get relentless back. And I think he got what he deserved. I sent him into a different promotion.
Tony Ferguson was on a mission to prove that he could beat huge gyms with names such as Jackson's, AKA, and the Black Zillion. Tony Ferguson understood that he wanted to create a training model that was based around him by creating the boxing style model where he didn't have to utilize high-level sparring partners and leverage high-level coaches instead. This approach led Tony Ferguson to a significant number of victories.
I don't have to belong to these big gyms because I am the big gym in Orange County. These guys, Dos Anjos and the Cowboys and the McGregors, all these guys, they have what they have, but I have what I have because I worked my ass off since the Ultimate Fighter house. And maturity is a one hell of a thing, man.
After Josh Thompson was beaten by Tony Ferguson, there seemed to be an immediate storyline that could have been built with Khabib Nurmagomedov. Khabib Nurmagomedov being a fellow aka alumni and stablemate of Josh Thompson, Khabib had a steady rise with some common opponents to Tony Ferguson. This truly was a clash of two rising powerhouses, something you don't see with boxing too often. Usually you get promoters who are trying to protect their assets. This could have been a scenario where one of them was derailed for good, but eventually we would come to see that both were so elite that they could not stay out of each other's way. Khabib Nurmagomedov found himself injured in this scenario at this time period. This span of injuries for Khabib provided a rough patch and potential retirement that he had hinted at due to the depression of not being able to fight. Coming from his background where fighting was a huge part of his life, his father being his main coach, him being unable to fight and rendered with injuries proved to be a mental battle that even he was struggling to overcome. Imagine looking back now and seeing that Khabib Nurmagomedov could have retired. Oh, how different things could have been. In this span of his UFC career, Tony Ferguson started to display more and more personality.
People were looking forward to your fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov. How disappointed were you, though, when you found out he was out?
I was pissed, Ariel. I'm going to be honest with you. I got up to 201 pounds preparing for this bear wrestler, and I want to take him to his home. I want to make sure. In Sambo, right, you take them from their feet to their back. What's that? Instant win, baby. And then I was going to finish him. He robbed me of that. Put you in a bubble, buddy. Just knowing that, you know, with Khabib's background and knowing that he does get hurt, he doesn't have anybody overseeing his training. You know, and he's not smart enough to be able to slow it down or get some rest because resting is a part of the fight game.
He respected Khabib, we could feel it. Once he was scheduled with Khabib and the fight fell through, he understood the quality of Khabib's ability to wrestle. He understood that this would have been a challenge, but felt confidence in his own skills to combat Khabib Nurmagomedov at his own game. Tony had supreme confidence in his ability to wrestle due to his collegiate history. I feel Tony Ferguson really did understand how good Khabib Nurmagomedov was, even though he wasn't directly giving credit to Khabib in interviews. The only reason he chose to continuously talk about him was because he respected him so much. Tony Ferguson showing a high IQ outside of the game, understanding different people's strengths and weaknesses, and seeing where he would collide with other people and have to outwill and beat them at their own game. Tony Ferguson began proving himself within the cage now, starting to show that he was willing to go through fire to get a win. He began a streak where in each fight he was under severe attrition, and perhaps due to his fighting style change, now employing the likes of Eddie Bravo and utilizing more ground techniques and being openly willing to being taken down. He saw himself taking more damage, getting dropped in more fights, and having to scramble to get back up.
For Ferguson, just over 3 minutes now to go in round two. Guillotine attempt here from Ferguson. Banana getting a little cocky. Banana starting to square. There's the attack.
Tony Ferguson found himself in compromising positions in multiple fights over and over again, but he continued to bounce back. When a fighter shows vulnerability and fights repeatedly, it initiates fan criticism, but also brings defenders of his style. Some fans will now gravitate towards him because they believe in Tony Ferguson. However, some are trying to tear him down and say that he's getting lucky, or perhaps it's just because of his cardio that he's getting saved in these fights. Either way, people are starting to talk about him and it is garnering interest. Due to the criticism and defense of his style, he naturally gained two sections of fans, one wanting him to win and one wanting him to lose. Regardless of the result, however, entertainment was guaranteed with Tony Ferguson. Tony paid his UFC debt in blood, sweat and tears every time he entered the octagon. He had done something in his camp where he refused to spar. He now was using the first round as a warm-up round in order to get the feeling out process done. While this may seem costly within fights, it did prove that he was on the winning track regardless of the end, in his ability to last and see through points of danger. This made him different to a lot of fighters because mentally he already had the edge over his opponent. A lot of fighters are very comfortable being the hammer in certain situations, but when it's their turn to be the nail, they can fold very easily. There is a separate mental battle that occurs within the cage when each fighter is facing two demons, fatigue and damage. Tony Ferguson showed that his ability to combat these two opponents was elite. This gave him an edge. Now that Tony Ferguson had proved that he was entertainment guaranteed, this created a snowballing effect with fans. Because of the rapid fire word of mouth marketing that fans were transitioning to understand, he was starting to get tweeted about a lot more. Clips of him were being shown online, pictures of him bloodied up, enjoying the battle. Fans live for this. Fans live for fighters who are willing to die in the cage, and Tony Ferguson proves just as much. Tony had now transitioned from villain and despised enemy to the cult leader of the fan base. People embraced him. They enjoyed his organic rants.
This is a rat race, but I'm no rat. I'm a fucking turtle. Ninja turtle. So which one's your favorite? I like Michelangelo.
If he's got beef with me, then whatever, dude. Go ahead, have your beef. You can eat it too, man. Where's the fucking beef?
If they don't, they're gonna piss me off. Hold on, I'm not done yet. Don't be rude. I'm the fucking champ up here. Recognize it. If I got some fucking shorts on, I got my shirt off, and I got my cut off, see, it don't matter what the fuck I'm wearing. You give me my respect.
They respected his hard work, and he became the win streak who deserved his shot. His merit in the cage continuously improved, his credibility had gone up, and even though his training methods seemed a bit wild at times, this all played a factor into how he was so good. People saw fit for Tony Ferguson to now be named within the elite of the competition due to his unique training. Tony Ferguson had abnormal training method, but this actually played more of a factor in fan interest, with people stating that Tony Ferguson is doing things that nobody else is doing. That's what makes him so special and gives him the edge over the elite of the division. People began to embrace Tony Ferguson. People began to be excited to watch Tony Ferguson. Tony also capitalized on this moment with very viral quotes, memes, great one-liners. Also, his passive-aggressive personality in interviews, in media scrums, and at press conferences.
Combinado, eu vim treinar. Hold on, I'm talking, brother. Não, vai te foder, vai tomar no teu cu, meu. What I'm trying to say is... O problema é teu, se tu falar, fala com o cara aí, vai tomar no teu cu, meu. Tá muito cheio da onda o cu do cachorro, vai tomar no teu cu, meu. Quando eu estou hablando, necessita cállate. Esse é o problema, cállate tu puta madre, maricón. Não, cachorro, não tem esse negócio aí comigo. Comigo vai falar com a tua divisão, seu palhação. What the fuck you want? Você não vai falar, eu não falar.
Tony Ferguson's reach had extended significantly, and because of his willingness to engage with fans on social media platforms, it made people connect to him even more. Tony Ferguson had now become the humanized fighter. Tony Ferguson became more relatable because he wasn't a polished gentleman in the traditional sense, in his speech or in his fighting style. He got knocked down, but he always got back up. He engaged with the fans, but kept the chip firmly on his shoulder. He had officially won us over. He had earned his flowers. But did he ever receive them?
Tony's great on his feet, and he's got good wrestling. We're just hoping that his pure athleticism makes up for some things.
Tony was now placing himself among the elite of the division. His win streak compiled of 4 tiers, each explaining the growth he had made, the significance of his role in the division, and with each tier he created more and more interest. Tier 1, the Green Tony, who showed he could bounce back from a loss but decided to roll the dice on himself. A gentleman who broke his arm in the middle of the cage but chose to continue on and show his grit, mentally sending a statement to the rest of the division, displaying that he has a never say die attitude. Tier 2. Joining Eddie Bravo, Tony displayed enormous changes. He had become a machine, putting his body on the line in a battle of wills, choosing to smile in the face of danger and snap submissions up in a way that had not been seen before. Even though Khabib Nurmagomedov had pulled out of the first fight with Tony Ferguson, Tony was slated to fight against Edson Barboza, proved to showcase Tony Ferguson's wild style, his ability to beat someone of a very high caliber, and also be entertaining at the same time.
Las piernas del Cucuy están en la cintura de Barboza, entonces una idea sería apoyar un poco en la lucha para preocupar a Barboza.
No, pero esa presión que mantiene el Cucuy, esa procede, pero al momento de que...
Mira, esta es buena, puede ser buena para el Cucuy. Aquí tiene buenas estrangulaciones, a ver si hay una toma de espalda. Estas son buenas, ya le encajó, tiene el brazo. Vamos a ver si alcanza a mejorarle el Cucuy. Hay que poner el brazo, ¡ahí está!
Consistent viral training methods, consistent viral one-liners, his ability to unintentionally become a trending meme also played into the hype machine that then pushed his title reign forward. The fight was made yet again, Tony Ferguson versus Khabib, getting elevated once more, one notch higher, more significance. This time Tony Ferguson had pulled out. Khabib went on to fight Daryl Horcher as a late replacement, someone who wasn't in the UFC or someone who wasn't at the same caliber as Edson Barboza. However, Khabib did receive praise, Tony Ferguson received criticism, but this fight was still well and truly on. In Tier 2, Tony Ferguson had beaten Josh Thompson, Edson Barboza, and Lando Venato with his new style change where jiu-jitsu was more prominent. Tier 3, Tony fought even higher competition but sparked debate between him and Khabib. This was the ultimate goal. He leveraged the interest in that fight by creating a possibility, a glimmer of hope that the world-renowned, dominating, suffocating bear wrestler could in fact be dethroned by the man with the wild technique. Tony Ferguson's method would have employed a no-nonsense jiu-jitsu game of setting traps and ultimate confidence. Tony had even won our support with his antics in interviews and flamboyant character. Our imagination ran wild with Tony Ferguson's in-ring performances. We began to believe that Tony Ferguson could indeed fight Khabib on the ground in his prime and do very, very well. It wasn't because Tony Ferguson was an ultimate master on the ground, it was because of his unpredictability, outside the ring and inside. Tony Ferguson was one of the most erratic fighters we had ever seen in the cage. Even upon entry in the cage, it felt as though no one knew what Tony was going to do, even himself. Tony would naturally just take opportunities and even in the face of danger continuously have the mindset to bounce back and then show the world that he was tougher than everyone else. Tony Ferguson began to elevate his competition, beating Rafael Dos Anjos and now being slated to fight Khabib for a third time. The stage was set, Tyron Woodley versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson for the second time, the co-main being Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov, UFC 209. It was now set up, third attempt at a real super fight between two pound-for-pound greats. Khabib had built his profile. This would have set the stage for deserving gold and played a large role in the 155 title picture, all alongside the Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather circus show that was taking place in boxing and had stole all media headlines. This was the real story of merit in the UFC 155 title championship, only for the fight to fall out the day before with Khabib having weight troubles, completing the wrong protocols and procedures and going to the hospital without informing the UFC brass. Fans were absolutely sick to their stomach once they found out that the reason they had travelled for this fight had now been cancelled. Us fans have now claimed this fight is cursed. Each time the fight has a larger profile, more intrigue and greater stakes. Yet we are continuously robbed by the MMA gods of this great matchup between two kings who we cannot decipher the alpha.
All right, I'm here with Tony Ferguson. Tony, you went through a grueling camp. You got here today, you made weight, and then you found out that the fight was off, that Khabib Nurmagomedov had to go to the hospital. What was your thought? What went through your mind when you got that news?
I thought it was a nightmare, man. Something worse than El Cucuy. There's just some shitty stuff that you had to go through. This happens in the fight game. No disrespect to the UFC or to Khabib. Everything happens for a reason. This is a fighter sport, man. So I want every single one of you to give love for the UFC and give love to Khabib
Time goes by, while Khabib continues to dominate on a parallel path. This tier gives us the epic rollercoaster of Tony versus Khabib for the grandest stage. Fourth time is a charm. Tony Ferguson had a substantial win over Kevin Lee, where he had to overcome adversity.
When he DDT'd you, how did that make you feel? How did that wake you up, or were you just like okay, or did it hurt? Or what was going on in your head as soon as you guys slammed on the mat?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. I don't even know what a DDT is. I think that's a WWE move.
Phenom brings to this table is conditioning. Now I told him if he's gonna piss me off, I'm gonna test that conditioning. I'm gonna make him go all 5 rounds.
We can do that. We can do that. I hope that you can stay in there.
People criticised Ferguson's style versus Khabib because Kevin Lee was so easy to get to the mount in the first 2 rounds. However, Tony did come out on top, submitted Kevin Lee. Tony received a gold belt and a black belt in the process. After Tony Ferguson had struck gold, he was set to fight Khabib yet again. This fight was booked well in advance, and the fight had gained so much interest. People really considered it a 50-50 fight. Tony Ferguson's insane work ethic.
I swear to God, if one of those two get hurt, man, I'm gonna freak the fuck out. What does Tony do when he's not in camp?
He's training every day.
What's going on with you?
Tony's always
every day.
He's training every day, man. He's just he does. I mean, that's his secret weapon. That's his default setting is train. Do cardio, do some kind of shit. He's doing something every day.
Eddie Bravo breaking down Tony Ferguson versus Khabib on Joe Rogan's podcast frequently. The fans could not get enough of it.
This is the toughest challenge ever for in MMA for 10th Planet. That's for sure. This is it. This honor fight with Khabib. You know, Tony wrestled his whole goddamn life.
Oh, Tony's phenomenal wrestler.
There's a light year difference between Connor's wrestling and Tony's wrestling, right? So you got that. Tony will throw Darce's standing and from all different angles
And
while you're trying to take him down. So Khabib's got to worry about that. There's going to be Darce's coming on the feet.
Damn, don't give out too much,
halfway.
bro.
Everybody knows that. You can watch that. Everybody knows that. I'm only giving away stuff that you could watch on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm
We
not
all-
getting,
yeah.
I promise you this, is we got all sorts of landmines waiting for him
got
and
some
traps.
shit,
We know where he wants to take the fight, and there's going to be some traps there. All sorts of them. And no one knows about them. We're not talking about them, but we've been working on this for a while. So
Jesus.
who knows what's going to happen? Khabib has my respect 1,000,000%.
Oh,
that guy's insane.
But if you didn't respect Khabib, you'd have to be crazy.
Tony
can't be my friend.
Tony has so many goddamn weapons. So many.
He's a
He
utility
might have
knife.
more weapons. He might have more weapons than anybody in the history of the UFC.
That's fair.
He does not hesitate to pull the trigger. He's never cautious. You know, a lot of guys, you hear about these guys like, the goal is to take what he does in the gym and out to the ring. That's the goal. If we could do that, he's going to be unstoppable. Tony, from day one, anything he does in the gym, he's going to do in the ring. No hesitation.
Fourth time is a charm.
You ready? Unfortunately, this is not an April Fool's joke. Tony Ferguson has pulled out of the fight. He's injured. He hurt his knee. The stud 145-pound champion Max Holloway is going to step up and face Khabib this Saturday in Brooklyn, New York, and it is for the official 155-pound title.
Fight with Tony, smash this guy and take belt same time, it's gonna be awesome, but he pull out, this is part of the game.
Do you have an insurance policy in place if one of these guys can't make the fight?
You got a 45 champion, I would gladly take that spot after March 3rd. If you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And the best is blessed, baby.
Tell me where, and that's it. Why you need to come here? Show up like you want to fight or something like this, send me a message, hey, come here, this place, and that's it.
As soon as we found out that Holloway didn't make weight, and that he was medically unfit to continue to cut weight, you know, we started looking at the other guys on the card. And if you
Weight 154.5 for the Eagle.
Awesome, you two. Thank you both very much. Good luck.
Let's go. This week they asked me fight with 5 different guys. Hey, I say, I'm tired about this. If you can bring King Kong and he can make 155, let's go.
Press is complete, commissions getting involved, Iaquinta weighing his underwear, but why? All due to Tony suffering a cruel injury due to tripping on a wire during UFC media. A sick joke bestowed upon us. Again, this fight has been cancelled. We had everything. The official title, 155 clarity, a 10-fight win streak versus a 9-fight win streak, a true 50-50 fight, the fan backing of Tony's grit, the boogeyman embraces versus the army of Khabib time, the next guaranteed foe for Conor McGregor on his return, only for Tony to now travel to dark depths and be hard done by an organization he had given years from the back end of his life for. Tony's currency was blood. He had deposited hefty amounts for the UFC, only to be stripped of his title 1 week after the gruesome injury, which seemingly was meant to end the boogeyman's dark reign of terror forever.
And after a while, he didn't return his text. I'm like, something, you know, he's a fucking superstar. There's a lot of shit going on, so I just said, okay, fuck it. So I left, and I get the text like at 11:25 at night, Saturday night. He said, I fucked up my knee. Blew my fucking LCL out. He wants to fight. He wants to fight. He did not want to fight, but his doctor said, you can't fight. And he was like, I need a second opinion. So he went to the UFC doctors. They said, nope, you can't fight. His LCL's detached from his knee, according to...
So it's pulled from the bone.
It's pulled off the bone.
Yeah.
That's what they said. It's really, it's not like, usually you
That's how Dana described it.
Yeah, when I say Tony wanted to fight, he would have fought with that shit. He didn't give a fuck. They wouldn't let him fight. He wanted to fight. You know those thick cables that they lay?
Yeah.
Apparently he tripped over one and fell. Fucking.
Fuck. That's insane.
It's the craziest thing ever.
It's insane.
It's so crazy.
It's so sad. That fight is doomed.
I said in an interview, kind of hinted or alluded to the fact, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But that they're going to strip Tony of his interim belt. Like,
Tony Ferguson had tripped on a wire, a cruel, sick joke during UFC media. Al Iaquinta now served as a late replacement to step in for Tony Ferguson. The title was made vacant due to a contract clause that Ali Abdelaziz had negotiated with the UFC, stating that if Tony Ferguson was unable to make it to the fight, the title would still be on the line, even though Tony Ferguson was the interim champion. This led to Tony Ferguson getting stripped by the organization 1 week after he brutally injured his own leg. Tony Ferguson's comeback was something to behold. Tony showing gnarly scars on his Instagram and showing fans that he's built from something different than the regular human, truly living up to the boogeyman name. Fans believed in Tony's ability to recover. Fans were excited by the prospect of Tony coming back to juice up the division once again. The division was much better when Tony Ferguson was in it rather than without, and the Khabib rivalry would continuously get bigger and bigger. Tier 4, the comeback. Khabib and Conor received the praise. Tony is left in the dust, recovering from a physical injury in record time, bouncing back from the mental setback of a fourth cancellation, and being stripped of the gold trophy he spent his entire life striving towards. The high school career, the jobs to make ends meet, the vulnerability on The Ultimate Fighter. In true Tony Ferguson fashion, a record-breaking 6-month bounce back against a former champion who seemed unbeatable during his own title reign. A co-main fight of the night performance on the biggest card in history.
On Showtime Pettis tonight.
Body, inside leg kicking base.
It's basically keeping... Sorry, Joe. Really tough as it comes, and he draws such strength from that. Big right hand from Ferguson. Counter reads, too. And then he switches stance.
Yeah, he's shooting.
And that's one thing about Pettis. He can bring us anything. He's on it. He's on it. By Pettis. As advertised so far. This is what they want from your guy. like this. He just got the blood here in the middle. Final second round. Mixed
At the end of round 2, Anthony Pettis' corner has called a stop to this fight, declaring the winner by TKO, Tony El Cucuy Ferguson.
When all had seemed wrong for Tony, yet he made us believe once again, si se puede. While we reeled off Tony Ferguson's victory, his ability to come back from the depths unknown, to go through mental battles that none of us will ever understand, carrying the pressure and being wronged by the organization that he had given so much for. We continuously praised his personality. We started to give him the credibility for his fights. We gave him hope in a fight against Khabib. But there was another storyline in his personal life which had now come to light during this period, and had perhaps showed its face at the worst possible time. February 5th, 2019, 4 months after his incredible comeback from the Anthony Pettis fight, Ferguson apparently purchased a life raft and took his wife Christina and their son on a long drive inland, all the way to Palm Desert, California, which is about 100 miles from their home in Santa Ana. Tony's wife wrote that he woke herself and their son up in the middle of the night there and demanded that they needed to leave because they weren't safe. After this incident, Tony promised that if there was no flood, that he would seek medical help with his mental issues, but he later refused. February 12th, 2019. Tony had what Christina described as psychotic break or a panic attack. He screamed in her face, swearing at her, and believed she was someone else. I woke up late that night to Tony standing over me, accusing me of being a witch. February 16th. Christina wrote that Tony unplugged the refrigerator and turned off half the power in their home. This was because he believed there was secret cameras in the refrigerator and ceiling fan, and that he was being watched. He also cut the wires to the heat and air conditioning units because he believed there was a tracking device in it. Christina called police from a park after leaving the couple's home to say that she was concerned for his well-being. She told investigators that Ferguson kept throwing holy water toward her and that his condition, which was redacted in the incident report, was worsening as he continued to refuse to see a doctor. February 19th. Welfare check was conducted on Tony Ferguson after he allegedly made unknown threats, prompting his wife and son to leave the home. An unidentified woman told police that Ferguson had not slept for 3 days and was tearing apart the home, and accused him of destroying a fireplace. Ferguson also believed someone placed a computer chip in his leg, the woman told police investigators. These were described by Christina, saying that Tony was drinking heavily and displayed manic behavior. Tony's wife added that she believed things began to get worse when Tony injured his knee in April 2018 and needed incredible extensive surgery. The injury forced him out of a UFC 223 title fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov. There are many frightening incidents which I have yet to list in this declaration. However, I have videos and photographs of Tony's frightening, irrational, and paranoid behavior, which depicts crying, laughing, muttering, yelling, etc., for no apparent rational reason. The man that we began to support again showed the quality that we saw initially, the first image that we had ever received of him during his appearance on The Ultimate Fighter had come to resurface, this time at a much more severe level. It was substantial, the amount of notoriety that Tony Ferguson had gained at this point, but it appeared as though his demons had got even larger as well. New levels, new devils.
I actually left the location with my son because I was not comfortable with it anymore.
Okay.
He is a professional fighter.
Okay. And it's your husband?
Yeah, it's my husband.
What's
so that's
his
what I'm
name?
saying. I don't want no cop to get injured.
What's your husband's name?
Tony Ferguson. And we've been trying all year for him to get help, and he refuses. And he puts holy water on me. I don't know what's going on with him.
Are you?
At one point, a restraining order was put in place by Tony Ferguson's wife Christina, but nothing further was done. It appears as though Christina did genuinely want the best for Tony, and at this point, instead of fans turning their back on Tony Ferguson, they actually came to support him in the masses. I believe we all knew that deep down he wasn't a bad guy, but having these episodes, he definitely had some trauma in his life, which was now resurfacing and giving him the bad image. Yes, some people took an opportunity to go at him for this, and it's understandable. However, there was no serious damage done by any of these episodes, and considering that his wife still has his support, I believe we should as well. Tony Ferguson's reaction to this news being in the public eye wasn't exactly a positive go down. Tony Ferguson wasn't interested in addressing reporters' questions about the scenario and wanted to resume with his fighting career.
I commend you for going headfirst into some mental health issues and working through that. It takes a lot of courage as I look up to you.
Fuck you.
I was giving you props. I was just wondering.
Fuck the advice. Next question.
I wasn't giving you advice, sir. Sorry. Okay.
A lot had happened in Tier 3, and the journey has been a long one. During his Tier 4 fight career, it appeared as though he had imploded fully. Tony Ferguson was at his worst mentally. It appears as though the collapse of Tony Ferguson was imminent. After beating Anthony Pettis, and after the news about his mental health struggles, Tony Ferguson went on to fight Donald Cerrone, with hopes of reigniting the Dagestani flame. It had only become present in this fight that Tony was battling two enemies every time he had stepped in the cage. Yet again, he came out triumphant in beating Donald Cerrone. While Tony Ferguson didn't look his absolute best in this fight, he still had those fans who believed that he could conquer the ultimate challenge, and his skills in fighting appeared to be at a high level still. In Tier 4, Tony Ferguson had beaten Anthony Pettis, gone through his mental health struggles, and beaten Donald Cerrone at the end of it all. The Khabib fight was made again for the 5th time. This was the last stand, the pinnacle of fighting, an unspoken understanding that this would be the last attempt at the war of our dreams, Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. Naturally, an elevated stage, personalities that had now gained immeasurable traction, a combined 24 win streak. Where will you be when only one of these men is left standing?
It's tiramisu time, motherfuckers!
You better fucking be there, Khabib. I'm glad you showed up.
Like even 36 years old is not good for lightweight division. You know,
That's fucking who, dude?
This is not like heavyweight.
Watch when you get your ass kicked by an old
No.
man. I just got old man strength.
We will see. We will see. But this
Champ shit only, motherfucker. I can't understand you,
is
son
gonna
of a
be
bitch.
big.
Oh, it's gonna be fucking.
When I smash him, when I make him
Can't
flat,
wait
when
to
I make
fucking
him
shut
tap,
your mouth in my
people are
hand.
gonna talk about his.
I'm gonna hit you so hard in your stomach, you're gonna piss fucking blood, kid.
A question was mentioned in an early press conference about the coronavirus pandemic, only for it to be shrugged off and booed by the crowd.
The Music and Arts Festival got canceled today because of the coronavirus outbreak. Any concerns, anything that you guys can do to try to... Hey, it's a legitimate question. It's a legitimate question.
However, this would become the defining point and lead to a Khabib pullout due to travel restrictions and Tony Ferguson claiming that Khabib had run chicken from the fight. Everyone's lives were put on hold. This would be the beginning of the end for the fantasy fight that had captured our imagination for a 5-year span. Throughout Tony Ferguson's UFC career, he had gained a belt, he had lost it. He had gained mental stability, but had lost it. He had gained the Khabib fight multiple times, but again, he had lost it. The only thing that he didn't lose was the fan support. Being able to display courage during times of hardship has always been a quality that great fighters have possessed, and Tony Ferguson is no different. After a review of Tony Ferguson's Ultimate Fighter footage, it appeared as though the one thing Tony Ferguson would never gain is the fans' interest. However, this was the one thing he was left with upon approaching the hardest fights of his career. The Khabib Nurmagomedov fight, the fight that had eluded Tony Ferguson for his whole career, was now scrapped. Tony Ferguson was set to fight Justin Gaethje on short notice during the coronavirus pandemic. Tony Ferguson had weighed in prior to the fight to make a point of the original date that he was scheduled to fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov. Some said this was to his detriment. While this could be a determining factor in the performance, Tony Ferguson lost his fight. He did have moments where he seemed to shine, but Justin Gaethje came in better and hurt Tony Ferguson severely throughout the fight. Tony fought well in the first 2 rounds, dropping Justin with a vicious uppercut and looking to secure the victory, only for Justin Gaethje to adjust and hit Tony with far superior power shots. The fight was stopped late in the 5th round. Tony showed his grit again, not being knocked down and not going out without a fight, only allowing a referee stoppage due to Herb Dean fully seeing enough damage within the fight. Even though Tony had lost his big shot, fans were still behind Tony and believed he could come back. They really did believe he was the true number 2 guy. However, this would be the last glimmering light that we would see in Tony Ferguson's career. A look back at Tony Ferguson's career shows us that he had many battles in his life, whether it be family, health, emotion, or in the cage. He now had his fiercest opponent, Father Time. Tony then went on to fight Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira coming off a win against Kevin Lee, seeming to be the new dark horse in the division, and initial perceptions being that Tony Ferguson should definitely handle Charles, a 145er, when Tony had previously fought at 170. To the upset of us fans, Tony Ferguson was met with a dominating loss.
Let's take a look at it again. He's going for it. He's got it fully locked out, but then watch when he tucks it under his left arm.
Oh, Joe.
Look at this. Watch this. Here it goes.
He's twisting the wrist and everything.
Look at this. Look at this.
Oh, he's
right
about to
there.
break his arm.
But fans never gave up hope on Tony Ferguson, and they still don't now. Tony was then given more killers in his division. Tier 5 of Tony Ferguson's fight career is the saddest tier of them all, where we see someone with so much potential, so much hope, someone who should have achieved even more. Someone who should have achieved incredible things in his career, who managed to capture the fans' interest through his exciting style, wilt away. We started to come to grips with Tony Ferguson's diminishing ability in getting dominated in these fights. The decline was real, the decline we had feared for so long, the decline that we still don't want to admit to this day. This was the guy meant to beat Khabib, wasn't he? In Tier 5, Tony Ferguson was booked against Khabib Nurmagomedov for the 5th time. The coronavirus pandemic had now become the headline of the world. Tony Ferguson had then suffered losses to Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush, and a jaw-dropping front kick knockout to Michael Chandler. Tony Ferguson is now slated to fight against Li Jingliang, the Leech, at 170 pounds. Can Tony Ferguson come back and control his angels and demons, or is it simply too late to do so? Regardless of how Tony Ferguson's career continues to play out now, he has achieved a lot in his career. He's fought the very best of the UFC, and he's continuously put his heart on the line in every single battle that he's been a part of. Upon first impression, it seemed more likely that the only way Tony Ferguson could capture our interest was to win hardware and have the best resume possible. Tony Ferguson had actually alienated us to begin with, so for him to garner our interest, root for him every time he stepped in there, shows how much of a unique subject Tony truly was. A gift to the organization and to the fight community. Tony Ferguson never had anything average about his life or career. The very extremes that made him so great are what also drove his mind to mental lapses not within his control. The angels and demons of Tony's life are coexisting. The demons cannot be less glorious than the angels because you cannot have one without the other. They are both intertwining with one another. Curtis Jackson once said, "Sunny days wouldn't be special if it wasn't for rain. Joy wouldn't feel so good if it wasn't for pain. Death gotta be easy, cause life is hard. It'll leave you physically, mentally, and emotionally scarred." just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you who have liked, commented, subscribed, and just supported me, watched my videos. It really means a lot, so thank you all so much. And I just want to say another huge thank you for everyone who shared, liked, and viewed the Diaz video. It's done insanely well, way over my expectations, so seriously, again, thank you so much.